Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Maddie here. Today we're going to be talking about the highest win rate decks so far this season in Pokemon Pocket, Mega Rising. Before we get into that though, go ahead, go register for the Pocket Meds Pocket Tournament number 9 this weekend, Saturday, November 22nd, noon Eastern time. $250 in the prize pool. This is the last tournament before Ranked comes out. So if you kind of want to compete against, the largest group of the best players in the game, this weekend is probably going to be your last opportunity to do it. We'll still be running tournaments after Ranked comes out, but I just assume maybe less people will be participating, and that's totally fine. But anyway, link down in the description below. Go and register. Can't wait for it. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. But anyway, we're on the Limitless.com platform, which is, of course, where the tournaments are held, but it's also where all of the best data and, the best way to sort of categorize deck lists and get an understanding of the metagame. So what we're going to do is go to the Decks tab here, as you can see, and then we're going to go ahead and go to Pokemon Pocket. And as we see here, Mega Rising, this is all of the data so far from this entire season. Large sample size. This is like paradise for me. The online tournament scene has been popping over the last 3 weeks. Mostly because Ranked isn't around. Of course, in our tournament series has been doing really well, but not just us, other people. 84 total tournaments so far this season, over 11,000 players and almost 30,000 matches, right? So from a sample size perspective, this is very, very good. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at which decks actually have the highest average overall win rates so far this season. So what the filter is here currently by default is by, it's organizing it by meta share. And as we see here, so count, right? So far the most popular deck this season is Mega Absol EX and Darkrai EX. Whether that's with Oricorio or Tyrogue or other variants, that is the most played deck so far this season at about 10% meta share and a 52.33% win rate. So one thing to note about this particular data that we'll take a look at is that it's for the entire season so far. And since we're like 3 weeks into the metagame, things have changed a lot over those 3 weeks, right? So decks that were really relevant and doing really well at the beginning of the season might not be very relevant at this point 3 weeks in. Some might be, some might not be, but that's one thing to keep in mind, right? So you got to take the information with a grain of salt. But anyway, Absol and Darkrai, the most played decks. We can get into the second most played deck right behind it at 9.4% of the meta share. Hydreigon here at 6.5% meta share, and then Mega Altaria and Indeedee, Mega Blaziken Entei, Mega Blaziken Heatmor, Decidueye, Magnezone, and all of these other decks. So the other thing you got to keep in mind is that the way that how Limitless breaks out archetypes is sometimes a little confusing, right? So we see Mega Blaziken, if it's paired with Entei EX, is separated from Mega Blaziken if it's paired with Heatmor. They are two different archetypes, they're different decks, and they function differently. Some things are a bit more confusing, like Mega Altaria, right? So if any Mega Altaria deck is playing Indeedee EX, at least one copy, it gets thrown into this particular category. If we go down here, any Altaria playing 1 or 2 copies of Giratina EX gets categorized into this category. And if we go down here, this is like if you're not playing either and you're playing double Chingling, it falls under this category. So like Altaria, because the decks are so much similar, but they're a little bit different in terms of how you're building it, that can be a little bit confusing. Suicune and Greninja is another thing that can also get a little bit confusing as well. So also Absol, because there's a bunch of different Absol variants. As we see, there's like Mega Absol and Hydreigon down here, and then there's also Hydreigon and Mega Absol. So depending on whether you're playing 1 or 2 copies of Mega Absol, it categorizes it differently. So it's important to know how that all works. But anyway, let's go ahead and dive right in. So we're going to click the win percentage rate here, and it's going to filter by, of course, average win percentage so far this season. And if we go ahead and do this, we're going to notice something's very interesting, and that's that Mega Altaria not only is the number 1, but also the number 2 highest average win rate deck, and even down here, like the 6th highest with Mega Altaria and Giratina EX. So yes, let's talk about Mega Altaria a little bit, and we'll pull up a deck list as an example. So the Chingling variant, although a much smaller sample size at 103 players, technically has a higher win rate than Mega Altaria and Indeedee EX with almost 700 players. So again, even though the win rate's a little bit higher, the sample size here is probably what's a little bit more important. I would prefer to have a 2,070 record to 1,654 losses than 334 to 261, right? It's a larger sample size. So either way, these are probably similar lists, but we're going to go ahead And we're going to go ahead and take a look at just an example, right? So if we click on this, it's going to show us all of the most, successful results of Mega Altaria so far this season. And it actually has the date, which is relevant. And this is going to be really important because, again, some of the decks here that we might take a look at were really good at the early season, but might not be good right now. So when you click on a deck list here, it'll show you the most recent results. If we were to have clicked on this deck and not seen a bunch of, recent results, then we know that it's probably not something that's that relevant at this point in the metagame. However, Mega Altaria and Indeedee definitely is. So the number one example here is this first place finish at a 245 player tournament. It got fourth place at last weekend's tournament. So, these are different examples here. It goes by probably record, maybe overall. Actually, no, it goes by placement. So third out of 188. So it just kind of categorizes them in some type of way. But anyway, let's take a look at one example here. This is going to be S0 Owen's deck from the Void Pocket Weekly. So I honestly do think that Mega Altaria is the most consistent deck in the game, right? So when we take a look at average win rates, that's a very valuable bit of information because it's against the entire field, right? So there's some particular matchups that you might be kind of worried about or you want to know that you're going to do well into, but the overall field, like when ranked battles come out, this is kind of the information that's going to be really relevant. So Mega Altaria is so good because it's so consistent. I've been saying it week after week. It kind of reminds me of like Genetic Apex Pikachu back in that original season. We had Mewtwo, we had Charizard, we had Articuno, but by far the most consistent deck was Pikachu, and it did really, really well going second, right? And that's the same with Altaria. We don't have to play rare candies, and if you take a look at all of the other sort of strongest, most played decks in the meta right now, they're all playing rare candy. And Altaria doesn't have to. So that's a really big deal, I think, in terms of the consistency for Altaria, which is why I think it's kind of boosting its win rate pretty significantly. What's interesting about this deck list here, though, as opposed to some other versions of Mega Altaria, is that we are still playing double Chingling and then one Indeedee. That seems to be kind of the standard here. The Chingling leadoff option with the Jingly Noise item lock is still extremely good in the meta right now. Also, it allows you to do something if you're going first. And what's interesting about this deck list is actually double options here to deal with Oricorio. We're not actually playing any Jirachis in the deck list. So we're playing one of the Do the Wave, non-EX Altaria, and Sableye. These are kind of tech cards that you throw into these Mega Altaria decks to be able to counter Oricorio. So I actually do like this, having multiple different options to get around Oricorio, as well as a Sabrina and double Rocky Helmet. So I really enjoy this particular list. And like I said, no surprise to me that Mega Altaria is at the top of the average win rates, because to me, this is the most consistent deck in the entire game. However, it's not winning every tournament, and that's not a downside to Mega Altaria. It's just the reality of it is that even though it's really consistent, other decks that are less consistent have a little bit higher of an upside, right? They have more potential, right? A turn 2 Mega Blaziken is just a little bit stronger than a turn 2 Mega Altaria, or, a turn 2 going first Hydreigon is a little bit better than Altaria, right? So there's certain decks that are inherently a bit stronger sometimes, but they're not as consistent as Mega Altaria. So that's why the win rate percentage is going to be so high for really all of the Altaria decks, but it's not necessarily the strongest deck. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind here. And then the Indeedee variant. So I guess we can just kind of sort of take a look at one of these versions, which I believe, or no, we just did that. If we take a look at the Chingling version, this is going to be probably a little bit more akin to what we saw earlier in the season, which, yes, this does make a lot of sense. So again, you got to keep in mind, a lot of the results that we just looked at for Mega Altaria and Indeedee were more recent, because that's the more recent version that people are playing Altarias with Indeedee. However, this Mega Altaria EX and Chingling version, which it has a smaller sample size, a lot of these results are older, right? November 2nd, November 3rd, November 9th, November 1st. Like, these are sort of early season lists, right, that did really well. In fact, there was one at 27th place here last weekend, but most of its higher placements are going to be in older tournaments. So that's something to keep in mind, right? We kind of, let's just pull this up for an example from November 2nd. This is going to be a version of the deck that we saw like before Indeedee got involved, which is playing double Chingling and Jirachis, but it's playing like, Elekid and Relicanth to take down, I believe, Oricorio. Now, it's just it's like an older version of the list, right? And I'm not saying this is a bad deck, but as the season goes on, the deck lists are going to change a little bit. So it's really important to understand how the data is presented to you on the Limitless platform and reading it properly, or just listen to me on my channel, because I guess that's what it's all about. Shout out to Froggy X Arca and his list really early on in the season. Really, really cool. But anyway, keep that in mind. So Mega Altaria here, realistically, that's my takeaway. Mega Altaria, the highest win rate Pokemon, just because it's so consistent. Very, very good. It would probably be my #1 recommendation, or my #1 deck on the tier list, even though it hasn't won back-to-back weeks, right? We got Oricorio that won back-to-back weeks. I still think Altaria is probably the most consistent deck in the entire game. 55 and 54% 50% win rates, especially for the 4th most played archetype with this big of a sample size, is very impressive. What's very interesting, though, are some smaller sample size decks that have very good win rates. This one is going to be the Indeedee Giratina deck that we've talked about a little bit. Again, a small sample here, 92 wins to 75 losses. So again, you know, the data here is a little bit less valuable than like 2,000 wins, right? Like the Altaria deck is, but this is still a very, very fun deck. And as we see, the results are very recent, right? So that smaller sample size is still maybe a little bit okay, just because this isn't a deck that really existed early on in the season. That means it's sort of catching on, you know, more recently. So that's something to keep in mind as well. As we see here, Luffy's deck here from the Storm's Morning Mega Standard, November 11th. I think we've already showcased this, but this is, you know, 11 wins, 1 loss, and this is recent, right? So this is a really, really strong deck. It's Oricorio. So the other thing that you're probably going to see in tournaments is that various different Oricorio archetypes probably also have a very high average win rate, just because oftentimes Oricorio doesn't lose games as much as it does, like, it ties games, you know what I mean? So, like, just the nature of Oricorio, a lot more games go to ties, which do work against it from a win rate perspective, but in general, I think Oricorio is just a really good Pokemon, especially this season with everyone playing Mega. So this version's really, really fun. This is that Oricorio Indeedee deck with Giratina. It's basically a stall deck with PCL Double Giant Cape. Indeedee's keeping Oricorio alive, and then we just kind of move through our opponent with, you know, a Giratina and an Indeedee or whatnot. So I really like this. This is definitely something that we've mentioned from time to time. We're not doing an updated tier list this week, but next week we likely will for ranked. So I really do enjoy Oricorio, and I think that it's really healthy to have it be really prominent in the metagame. But as we see, you know, 11th, right? This was sort of the first result that a lot of people began to play this deck list. And since then, we've seen, you know, 14th place here at our tournament this past weekend, 2nd place at the smaller tournament on the 14th, you know, placement here on the 17th, 12th. So, like, this is a deck list that definitely has a little bit more recent results, which is interesting, right? And again, another deck that's not seeing a lot of play is Guzzlord Naganadel. So, yes, from a win rate perspective, this season, Naganadel and Guzzlord is one of the highest. It's the 4th highest win rate at 53.5%. I absolutely love Guzzlord. Let's take a look here at E-Lord's deck, or deck rather, because, yeah, like literally the 2 top placements here are from the last 2 Pocket Mads tournaments, which is hilarious to me. But anyway, E-Lord's list from this past weekend was really good. So, you know, again, Naganadel Guzzlord is a really, really fast-paced deck and a very consistent deck now with Copycat. We're playing only basic Pokemon with basically with free retreat, free pivoting throughout the entire deck with Celesteela's Ultra Thrusters, and then double Copycat to find that Naganadel basically every game, right? So it's an incredibly consistent deck, and it's very fast-paced and aggressive. It deals with Oricorio very well. Many, many reasons why I think this Guzzlord deck is phenomenal, and I think that it deserves to see way more play. So just something that, again, we've spoken about previously on the channel, but I can't really say it enough how much I actually really do like, you know, Guzzlord right now in this current metagame. So yeah, you know, Naganadel Guzzlord, it's up there amongst the other highest win rate decks, right? So when I take a look at the data, I'm thinking to myself, yes, you know, we have things like Altaria up here, Magnezone Oricorio, right? Suicune Greninja, Blaziken Heatmor. These are the best decks in the game because they've won the most, you know, because they see the most play. But things like Indeedee Giratina, like Guzzlord Naganadel, like these are deck lists that probably deserve to see more play because they have really good win rates in the limited play that people have played them. Here in 5th is Magnezone Oricorio. So yet another Oricorio deck. This to me is like the premier way right now to be playing Oricorio. I just think that it's so good for the same kind of reasons that Guzzlord Naganadel is. It's just been improved. 1,263 to 10 or 1,052. So a 53% win rate. Very, very good win rate. In a pretty decent sample size for the 8th most played deck. 422 people playing it. This deck probably will see more play as time goes on. Let's actually take a look here at the 13-0 list from November 6th. Actually, let's take a look at a more recent one here from Storm's Mega Madness here. Also first place, 11-2. This might be a very similar list than one from that won our tournament. But yeah, I think that, again, very similar to Guzzlord, where the deck hasn't really changed at all. We just have access to double Copycat now, and that makes it so much more consistent. These decks that rely on like that middle evolution or like the stage 1 evolutions really, really do benefit from Copycat, and we see the same thing with Altaria. So that's the biggest thing for me so far this season, which is a really big standout, is that Copycat is such a good card for stage 1 evolution decks that I think that that's going to be something that we kind of see moving forward. Previously in Pokemon Pocket, Stage 1 Pokemon kind of suffered. Like, you either played strong basic Pokemon or strong, like, fast-paced, aggressive, rare candy combo Stage 2 Pokemon. But now with Copycat, like, we can play these Stage 1 Pokemon a lot more reliably just because it's way more consistent, and we could basically guarantee to have that Pokemon out on our second turn with double research, double Copycat. So I really love Magnezone, and again, I know Magnezone's a Stage 2 Pokemon, but it relies on its Stage 1 Magneton, right? And if you don't get that Magneton down early, then the deck doesn't really function. So Copycat allows that to happen. This is a deck that you could also play like Pokecom in. But yeah, it's Oricorio. This is kind of the best way that I would play Oricorio, or the top way that I would consider to play an Oricorio deck right now. It did win a 750 player tournament, our tournament this past weekend. But yeah, Magnezone Oricorio definitely slept on. I mean, yes, it's the 8th most played deck so far this season, but that win rate is the 5th highest win rate, right? So definitely probably deserves to see a little bit more play even then, right? Mega Altaria again. So the third Mega Altaria deck here with a 53% win rate, 127 people playing it. This is going to be Altaria with Giratina. And again, we might see it just as an example here from the results. It's a mix. Okay, I was going to say this seems like maybe a bit more of like an early season type of deck, but we do see some results here on the 13th, the 15th, 12th, 13th. So nothing like super recent, but some more recent results, right? From the Imperium Series #1 here, second out of 340 people. This is going to be, yeah, Mega Altaria with double Giratina. So this is another way that we can build this deck list and be just incredibly strong. Like double Altaria, double Indeedee, double Giratina is absolutely terrifying to me. I would compare this to like playing, Blaziken and an Entei, right? Where you're not really countering or, I guess, counterplaying other decks like other rare candy decks with Chingling or, I guess like Oricorio decks with Sableye and stuff like that. We're just really focused on like hitting for big damage and having multiple attacking options and then healing with Indeedee. So this is a very like power hungry version of Mega Altaria, but as we see here, maybe the Do the Wave Altaria and double Rocky Helmet is enough, but Mega Altaria is just such a consistent card. Going second, it's so dangerous. I really think it's one of the best Pokemon in the entire game right now. No surprise to me that even this Giratina version is one of the highest win rates in the entire game right now. So again, Altaria really carrying the win rates, I think, for a lot of these different deck lists. Greninja EX and Suicune EX. 100%, it is up here. The 10th most played deck. What's interesting here is that this is the version of Suicune and Greninja playing no Giratina, and then this version down here, which is again the second most played deck, is playing Giratina. And technically speaking, the non-Giratina versions have a higher win rate, but they're very similar, and the sample size is much bigger for the Suicune with playing Giratina. So let's kind of use this as an example. Greninja EX and Suicune EX. Most of these results are actually fairly recent, some older results as well. Let's take a look at this player here who got first on November 15th out of 135 players. And this is going to be the version of Suicune and Greninja, but without Giratina. So we're playing double Greninja EX and then a single Water Shuriken. This is a deck list that, again, is going to be a little bit less good into like Oricorio decks because it's less often or less consistent for us to find that Water Shuriken Greninja, but it is going to be a little bit more consistent and powerful in terms of, again, not really playing around Oricorio to that degree, right? So you got to understand when you're building different deck lists, how do they sort of perform? For me, I've been playing or considering Giratina and Suicune Greninja as probably still the more premier option. It's still the more popular version of the deck list, and not only that, it has, again, kind of been all of the best placing versions of Suicune and Greninja over the last couple of large tournaments, right? So there is an opportunity for this deck list to kind of take over, but from what I'm seeing from just like individual tournament data over the last week or two is that the Giratina version is still a little bit better. But anyway, throughout this entire season, this deck list here, and again, it's a smaller sample size, does technically have a higher win rate, 803 to about 700, right? So 800 to 700, 52.7% win rate. But if we go down here to the second most played deck this season, which is Suicune Greninja EX, this is going to be with Giratina in a single Greninja EX, I believe. Like way more placements overall. This is a more played deck. It has more higher placing, results basically. Let's take a look at this deck here that got first in the Pocket Legends League here. With 360 players. And this is kind of the more, actually, no, this list is also not even playing Giratina. So I guess, okay, so the way that Limitless is categorizing this then is how many Greninja EX we're playing, which is interesting. Okay, so this is okay. So again, let's go back here because I want another example. I believe the list here at our tournament 2 weeks ago was playing Giratina. Yes, it was. Okay. This is interesting data. What about this one here from November 14th? Also playing Giratina. Okay, so maybe that one deck was kind of an outlier. But anyway, the way that I think Limitless is categorizing this deck is mostly by, of course, the quantity of Greninja EX seeing play, right? So if you're playing two Suicune, of course, which you are, or two of the Water Shuriken Greninja and one of the Shifting Stream Greninja, it's different. It's a different list. Now, personally, I don't know about Giratina. I have been told people before, everybody asks me, should you still be playing Giratina in Suicune? That's a great question. It's hard for me to answer that because I just honestly don't really know. But I will say, I do think playing double Water Shuriken Greninja with Cyrus is still better than playing like one of Water Shuriken and then two of the Greninja EX with Shifting Stream. This card's really good, but I don't think you oftentimes, like, you don't always need this card. It can be specifically really good against like mega decks where you can kind of live two attacks, maybe against like a mega Absol, right? Because we have 170 HP. That can definitely be really relevant. And of course, the ability is really strong. But for the most part, I would still say you want 2 copies of Water Shuriken Greninja over 2 copies of Greninja EX. Even though, again, you know, the win rate data is pretty much the same between the two. The sample size is a lot larger for, you know, the copies of this deck that are playing one Greninja EX. So keep that in mind. That's 3,140 to 2,700, right? So just a big difference, even though technically the percentage is a little bit lower, a much larger sample size. I would rely on this data a lot more heavily. Let's take a look at Mega Blaziken and Heatmor, because this is already the 6th most played deck this season. It was the most played deck at our tournament this past week, and 5% of the entire meta share so far this season. 564 people playing it. It's at 52.5%, and that's 1,700 to about 1,470. So a really, really decent win rate here. It's not as high as things like Altaria, and again, this is because in my mind, this is still a rare candy deck, right? So when you watch Mega Blaziken, or if you played enough, you're gonna lose some games just by not having rare candy and not being able to really evolve, right? And Chingling does exist as well, so we're a little bit reliant on that middle evolution. Let's take a look here at the deck that got first place let's do November 13th, more recent list here. First place out of 340 people at the Imperium tournament. And I really like this deck, and I still think it's one of the better decks in the entire game. We can play the Heatmor, and we can play Mega Blaziken on the back end. We have, you know, Rocky Helmets, we have Cyruses. Like, I really, really, really like this deck list, and I think it probably will solidify itself as like a top 3 decks, you know, in this current season. Maybe that changes if things go forward, but I do like the Heatmor strategy a little bit more than the other versions. And I think as long as Oricorio becomes relevant, which I think it will remain relevant because Magnezone won our tournament this past weekend, I think that this is still the better way to play it. But again, you know, it's a rare candy deck list. And yes, one Combusken, I get that. One Copycat, double research. But at the end of the day, it's not as consistent as something like Altaria. So you can't expect its average win rate to be as high. That doesn't mean the deck isn't as good because it's overall a stronger deck. I just don't particularly think that this is something that's going to be as consistent as if you weren't playing rare candy, right? That extra 20 HP can matter. Now, one thing that might be the difference for Mega Blaziken moving forward is its access to Lily. This list here does not play Lily, but we might be able to find a list that does. Let's take a look at this one from back a little bit farther back. Also not playing Lily. That's the main difference here is one cape and one helmet. Let's find maybe, does this list play Lily? It does, okay. So here's an example here, playing one May, one Copycat, one Cyrus, and one Lily. So I think that honestly, moving forward, like the thing about Mega Altaria is that it's, again, more consistent. It does 10 less damage if you equate the burn damage, but that burn damage also ticks at the end of your opponent's turn sometimes, right? So that 140 can actually be 160. Mega Blaziken does a bit more damage, which is relevant. That 140 HP number is a little bit better than 130. There's a lot more Pokemon that you can KO at 140 than 130. But not only that, it's a stage 2 Pokemon, so you get 20 extra HP and you get access to Lily, and Mega Altaria can't use Lily. So to me, that's sort of one of the defining characteristics of Mega Blaziken. You're trading a little bit of that consistency having to play Rare Candy being a stage 2 Pokemon, but we are able to play, you know, Lily, and we are able to deal a little bit more damage, right? So maybe that becomes the main difference moving forward, but I still think that this is the best way to play Mega Blaziken. In fact, none of the other versions of Mega Blaziken are even remotely close up here, which is interesting, right? Because still, like, if we go back here and we filter by the win share, or sorry, the meta share, you'll see that Mega Blaziken is still higher up in terms of the meta share, because for the first like week or 2 weeks of the season, this was the way that people were playing Mega Blaziken. Our first tournament of Mega Rising was actually dominated by Mega Blaziken, and Entei was the most played deck, but things have changed, right? So all of a sudden, eventually, what we're going to see is Heatmor higher up here because, you know, more people will have played it than Entei throughout the season. So that's the one thing to keep in mind, right? Also, Entei's its win rate definitely suffered, right? So you can see the staggering difference here But if you don't understand what this data means, then it might be a little bit confusing, because it's like, you might be thinking like, why would anybody choose to play Entei over Heatmor, right? Because its win rate's a lot lower. And that's the thing, is that they're not. People are just choosing to play Heatmor right now. It's just, you know, this is equating data from 2-3 weeks ago. It's adding it all up. So it's important to understand that. Let's filter by win rate here again. And yeah, let's next up take a look here at filtering by win rate. Let's take a look here at Mega Absol and Darkrai, because this is going to be one of the more interesting examples. The #1 most played deck this season, 1,200 people have played it, and it has a 52.3% win rate. So not a bad win rate whatsoever. But if we take a look at this deck and we take a look at its results, you'll see a lot of the results for this archetype are old, right? So from November 3rd, November 1st, November 2nd, November 3rd, November 2nd, November 5th, like November 4th, like this is a deck list that saw way more play earlier on in the season, and it did win our tournament 2 weeks ago. The Pocket Mets Pocket Tournament number 7. So this is something to keep in mind. Like a deck list like this, if you go to Limitless and you go to the data, it's going to be at the top of the list, and it's going to have a pretty high win rate. So you might be like, maybe this deck is worth playing. But keep in mind that this archetype, categorized as Absol and Darkrai, has changed dramatically. So let's take a look here, right? If we take a look at the list that actually got, first place here at the Pocket Mets Pocket Tournament number 7 on November 8th, this is going to be the Oricorio version, right? And we're seeing that this version of Darkrai and Absol is definitely struggling. Not many people are playing Absol this way right now. They're playing it with Hydreigon, and they're playing it with, just in other archetypes. Absol's still seeing play, and it's still seeing play with Darkrai, but not so much with Oricorio, right? You wouldn't know that by just kind of taking a look at this information. Not saying this is a bad deck, but it hasn't been performing that well recently. And if we go ahead and we take a look at, let's say, like a placement from a more recent tournament, if we can find one here. Let's see, where can we find? So this is 12th. This is going to be the Pavsby Birthday Bash, first out of 316. This is also going to be the Oricorio variant. So this seems to be kind of the last recent like high placement for this list. And this was on, what was this, the 12th? Yeah, the 12th. Okay. So interesting, right? So it's been, nothing really so far this week. None of these high placements have been in the last week, which is interesting. But what we can do here, let's check out the 15th. Maybe this is only Oricorio archetypes? No, it's not. Okay. So this is a more recent version of a list that did well. Again, still categorized as Absol Darkrai, but it's a very, very, very different deck. Here we're playing double Chingling and we're playing Tyrogue. This is sort of the other version of Mega Absol Darkrai that has been seeing a little bit more play recently under this archetype. So you're still going to see people playing this, but this is technically a completely different deck than the Oricorio version, but Limitless is still categorizing it in one way. So that's another thing to be a little bit, it's kind of confusing. If you're not really keeping up with the metagame, it's hard to understand. I do like this deck. Mega Absol Chingling goes well together. Darkrai for the extra damage, Tyrogue for Oricorio. I like this list, but what we've seen recently and what we saw actually at the Pocket Mats tournament this past weekend was, a version, excuse me, of Mega Absol and Darkrai, but they were playing Leap over Absol, right? I believe with Chingling, or no, I think it was with Hydreigon. But anyway, interesting nonetheless. Mega Absol is definitely one of the more interesting things because it's flexible in terms of the decks you can play it with. Its win rates are pretty good, as we see there's Mega Absol Darkrai down here at 52.33%. And if we go down a little bit, there's Mega Absol and Chingling here, which is again a very small sample size. Only 88 players playing this variant, but it has almost a 52% win rate as well. And let's wrap up this video because we're almost at 30 minutes by talking about this archetype here particularly, which I really like. So this recent list got 4th at 188 player tournament. And this is a really funny deck because I love this deck, and this is going to be Chingling Mega Absol, but with Nihilego and Poison Barb. So this is maybe like a not so well-known variant of Mega Absol that I also really like, really high up there from the win rate ladder perspective. And I think this is a list that probably deserves to see a little bit more play, if we're being honest with you. So I really like this. This is just another flavor of Mega Absol. This one is with Chingling. You might be wondering, like, where's Hydreigon? Hydreigon's pretty far down here, right? From an average win rate perspective, the third most played deck of the season, it's just over 50%. So very, very close to a 50% win rate. But I do still like the Hydreigon variant. In fact, the one that got second place this past weekend is, I think, a really, really good list with Leap over Absol. So again, anything with Hydreigon and Mega Absol will be categorized under this category, but we haven't seen this Leap over Absol tech in recent or before just recently, right? So I think that, even though if we take a look at this overall data, Hydreigon maybe doesn't have the highest win rate, I think it has the opportunity to maybe be a little bit of a better deck than we thought previously because of this Leap over Absol tech for sure. And Hydreigon also a Pokemon Pokemon that probably isn't the most consistent thing in the world. It's a bit of a high roll deck, right? Because we're reliant on that early rare candy combo into Hydreigon, and we're not playing the middle evolution, so we can get Chingling locked pretty easily. And that's why this leap over Absol, I think, is, newly included into this deck list. So I really like this archetype. And again, it got second at our tournament. So I think that this is also a really interesting deck. But again, Hydreigon is a little bit more of a high roll type deck, not necessarily something as consistent as something like a Mega Altaria. So that's one thing to keep in mind. These are the highest win rate decks so far this season. You'll be interested to know that there's really, what is this? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So there's like 20 decks so far in this metagame that are all above 50%. Everything else, every other deck that has seen play so far this season is below a 50% win rate. So you might find that to be kind of interesting, right? And I do as well, to be 100% honest with you. But it's just the reality of things. And yeah, we have to keep in mind. Yeah, Pokemon Pocket. Okay, wait. Oh, I think we broke it here because this isn't Pokemon Pocket. I got to go back. Let's go to decks. We'll go back to Pokemon Pocket. I broke Limitless real quick, and then we'll filter by win rate. So yes, that is everything in this video that we've showcased are the highest win rate decks in the game. But as you'll see, a lot of the best decks, a lot of the more successful decks don't necessarily have like super high average win rates. And that's because there's a main difference between being consistent and being overall just really strong and powerful sometimes. And winning tournaments doesn't always come down to consistency. It comes down to, how strong you can be. Like, do you have the ability to beat a Mega Altaria, in top 16 and top 8? Because a lot of these decks do, they just don't necessarily have the same, consistency level. But winning tournaments isn't about being consistent. It's about getting lucky more than your opponent. And if you get lucky and your opponent gets lucky, you'd rather play the stronger deck. And that's really what it comes down to oftentimes. So, yeah, anyway, guys, comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of this video. I know some of these videos might be, or this series of videos might be a little bit hard to digest, but I like to kind of bring the data to you guys and just sort of give you my insights here, because again, a lot of sample size here. We're 3 weeks into the season, and that's typically when I make this type of video. So when ranked battles come out, which they will be next week, you got to take a look at these average win rates, because the field of decks that you're going to be hitting in ranked mode, there's going to be a lot of them, right? And I think that when you're playing ranked, you'd rather play something that, consistently does what it wants to do. And I think that the average win rate is probably the most useful metric when determining which decks are best to grind ranked battles with, not so much winning tournaments. That's sort of the big difference. Not to say, something like a Hydreigon wouldn't be that good in ranked, because I do think it would be. In Oricorio decks, Decidueye, like those would probably be decent ranked decks, but like, I think that playing consistent decks is kind of the better option when you're playing ranked as well. So, Mega Altaria to me is kind of really high up on that list. Naganadel, Magnezone, these are really, really consistent decks. Suicune, Heatmor, Blaziken, kind of all of the best decks in the entire game. Interesting how it all works out that way. But anyway, comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know, was this video interesting? Was this helpful? I don't know. But anyway, there it is. We'll do an updated tier list next week when ranked comes out. By the way, don't forget to register for the Pocket Mads Pocket Tournament number 9. Where is it? I don't know. I had a link to it somewhere, but maybe not anymore. Go register for the tournament. Link down in the description below. Definitely going to be a whole lot of fun. And stay tuned. Mega Pidgeot just released for solo battles. I'm curious to see its impact on the metagame. I actually don't think Mega Pidgeot is a bad card. I think it actually is quite strong. The energy discard is kind of broken, I'm not going to lie. Maybe some people will figure out some broken ways to play it. I'm really curious to see how that works out. We'll maybe make a video on Mega Pidgeot later this week if, a really quality list comes out. But anyway, stay tuned for that. And yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you guys later. Peace out. Have a good one. I said this video would be short. It's 32 minutes. It's short for me, I guess. All right. Bye.